Welcome to Side Effects. Effect versus affect. It's hard to know the difference. At McGohan Brabender, our goal is to provoke you to think differently about employee benefits, your employees, and the status quo. That's why it's Side Effects with an A. Join me, Kenzie McEvely, an MB co-host and one of the industry's brightest guests to dive deep into the process of good employee benefits. Let's get started. In today's world, it feels like your entire life is online. Your name, finances, social security number, passport number, credit account number, street address, email address, Facebook status, the list goes on and on. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, we've all moved to the digital world to survive. Enter more cases of ID theft, fraudulent sites, and phishing scams, which is exactly why we brought on today's guest, Kim Redd, a LegalShield employee benefits specialist. Kim received her professional designation as a certified identity theft risk management specialist in 2006 and is a licensed property and casualty insurance agent. She is the most knowledgeable person to educate us on why fraud protection is so important, especially in today's post-pandemic world. Although Side Effects focuses on employee benefits, today's topic should be of interest to anyone who doesn't live off the grid. Welcome, Kim, to the show. Hello, Anne-Marie. Welcome to the studio. I'm so glad to have you here with me today.
Hey, Kinsey. I'm happy to be here today.
Perfect. And we have Kim on the line. How are you today, Kim?
I'm good. Thank you for having me today.
We're so glad you're here. This is a very hot topic right now. Identity theft, in my eyes, when I first think of it, I think of like Law and Order. I think about the crime shows, which are kind of fun, exciting. But in reality, identity theft is awful. So could you tell us a little bit about how you got into the field at LegalShield and identity theft, Kim?
Oh my, several years ago, I had an American Express card that never left my possession, and someone ran up over $4,000 in one day.
Oof.
Now, that is financial identity theft, and we'll talk about the types here in a little bit, but yeah, it was an exhausting process. They were really good about recovering my card and changing it and all, but as you can imagine, it was at the holidays, right, when you're tending to have things hit. And so it was shocking because the card never left my possession.
Yeah, that's so unbelievable. And I've known many people over the years that have had that happen. And thank goodness that you decided to do something about that, right? And to help educate the rest of the world about what that could mean. So if you could, for our listeners, maybe Kim, explain, what ID theft is and the most common types of ID theft. I know you just used one example of financial identity theft, but what else is out there that people should know about?
Sure. Basically, identity theft is when someone else gains access to your personal information, whatever that information is, and uses it without your permission. And so financial is the one that we are most familiar with, but that's actually only about 33% of the problem. Mm-hmm. There's also driver's license, where somebody can put their face on your license, drive around being you, getting tickets, and you don't know till they didn't show up for court. Social Security, where they collect wages in your name. Medical, where they can get procedures done and even compromise your medical records. And then character or criminal, where they commit a crime in your name.
Wow.
I didn't know all those. Wow.
Yeah, it's way more. I think that as we learn more about this, we might be scaring our listeners a little bit, but let's maybe just try to educate them a little bit.
Right. So, Kim, why is it such a big business, and who exactly is at risk the most for ID theft?
Well, your identity has a resale street value of between $10 and $60 on the street. And when there are breaches that take place, they're taking many identities. So there's no physical inventory. There's nothing to purchase or maintain, and they can be used over and over and over again. And unfortunately, the bad people are aware that somebody's probably going to give you a service for a year or two, so they'll use it in 5 years. So it's not like it expires. And in terms of who's at risk, no one is immune. We're not saying that to scare people, but you just need to be aware. We need to live our lives. But we have seen where children are 51 more times likely to be a victim because they're not supposed to have credit at all. Seniors, typically 1 in 4 of people who are over 55 have already been a victim. Active military, we see a lot of issues there because they're abroad, they're away, they're not monitoring. And so, and then social media users are 30% higher because they're just putting their information right on out there.
Yeah, Kinsey's wrinkling her nose. Yeah, she's our social media expert, so she's out there. So now, Kinsey, you are 30% at more at risk than others. So, my goodness. So if we look back at 2020, obviously the pandemic had some positive impacts, and that was that everybody had an opportunity to do something a little differently digitally, right? And so moving people online that weren't online before so they could speak to their grandkids, or they could visit with their family, or visit with their doctor. There were all sorts of ways that people became more engaged in the digital world. So when you think about that, what are some of the trends that you've seen since the start of COVID that might have been, that have picked up activity or maybe didn't even exist prior to March of last year?
Yeah, the e-commerce vendors are really on the rise, and you'll see a lot of those advertising in your Facebook and your game apps where they're advertising for you to purchase some great thing, and then by the time you get it, it's something that belongs on a key ring or something. I mean, it's nothing like what you paid for. Phishing sites are bad right now where you'll get an email, and we caution people, don't open or act on an email that you don't know the origin of, where it's asking to move money around or verify your own financial information. Taxpayers, unfortunately, have lost about $1.9 billion since March of 2020 to unemployment claims that are fraudulent. That is on the rise. I get calls about that 2 to 3 times a day.
We've seen so much on that. In fact, it was when I flipped on the news last night, well, the TV, not the news, but channel 1, whatever comes up on your cable was on, which repeats on a loop. And it was listing the statistics for the amount of money the state of Ohio has lost in fraudulent unemployment claims. It was very timely for what we're talking about today.
Wow. That's intense.
Yeah, and another one, I just want to mention this too, so it doesn't alarm people. We're at tax filing time now, or I know it's been extended, but another thing that the Ombudsman shared with us just last week is that they're getting a number of people complaining that they've gone to file their taxes and they get a notice back from the IRS that they can't file their taxes because they are deceased.
Right. Oh my gosh.
Could you imagine getting that notification? Oh my.
Right.
Well, when you said that, Kim, we have in McGohan Brabender, we get a lot of phishing scams and fraudulent emails, and we actually added a banner on the top of our emails that says, this message came from outside of McGohan Brabender, which was a huge safety thing that I think helped a lot here.
Right.
Would you say?
Yes, because we were getting emails every other day from our CEO saying, hey, can you transfer some money or send me, go buy these gift cards, or all kinds of strange phishing, which obviously he wasn't sending. So
no.
And that's what we're seeing, is that there is a shift actually from trying to capture as much consumer information to targeting businesses and trying to get that business to conduct some kind of financial transaction that looks real. So it's great that you've put that banner out there.
Right. So kind of touching on that too, where are these thieves going to get our information? Do they track your mail? Do they know when you file for unemployment? How do they know who to target?
One of the things that I try to share with consumers, it is nothing you are doing wrong. You actually are not a target because of anything that you're doing for the most part. It's just because you're living your life.
Right.
The fact is we have something called Personally Identifiable Information, or PII. You'll see that acronym. And it's our name, our social security number, our address. It's things that are unique to us. And it can be captured in these database breaches and things like that. But the fact is your information is everywhere. You have 2 identities. The one that you and your family and friends all know, that's one you. And then the other you is the database you. Your information is already in hundreds of databases because you've worked, you've been educated, you've had medical procedures, and that information is out there for the bad people to take.
Anytime they want, really. Anytime they want. So continuing that conversation, where, you listed a few of the things, like where are the top places that your identity is stolen? And, what's the likelihood in anyone's lifetime that their identity is stolen? maybe if you've got some statistics around that.
Well, as I mentioned, the shift has gone away from the mass attacks because what we were seeing were breaches like the U.S. Postal Service and the Social Security Administration. We're all ladies of style here, so we may have gotten the DSW shoes letter a couple of years ago.
Yes.
Yep.
What they're doing now is looking at those bigger businesses, but there's also the individual breaches. There's acquaintances that you might have met along the way who have decided to swipe your mailbox and see what kinds of credit card offers you have out there. So it takes many forms. I don't have a specific statistic on your likelihood of getting breached or attacked, but I do know that 33% of the population has already been a victim.
Yeah.
1 in 5 people have been a victim more than one time, and there's a new victim every 2 seconds.
Wow. So, my prior life was in the financial world and in the banking side of things. I spent 17 years there, and this was, before the internet. So now I'm dating myself, and before email and all of those things. But we saw fraud back then, quite frequently in the banking world of people's accounts being compromised and credit cards and so forth. And so fast forward, I'm going to say it 30 years into this digital world, and the number of breaches continues to rise. And I had a situation similar to you in probably 2004 where I had my credit card in my wallet, and someone had purchased over $6,000 in computer equipment. And I just couldn't, get my head wrapped around that. Fast forward a couple of years ago, I had a client call me because someone had filed taxes in his name, right? He wasn't deceased, but they had already filed a tax return in his name when he went to file. And just the frustration for him and his wife of trying to prove their own identity. She couldn't pass the state of Ohio's test to prove her identity because she couldn't answer any of the questions correctly,
Oh my.
based on where she used to live or the car she had or whatever they were asking. And they had to actually drive to the state house in Columbus to prove, and they had to get their marriage license and their birth certificates. And these are people in their late 60s. And boy, were they upset. And, they didn't have anything at that time to protect their identity or help them with that. And it was a really big problem for them as business owners and as people on the earth. So I just can't believe how many stories. And I tell my friends and family, it's going to happen to you. It's just a matter of when. So look at your statements and, be vigilant.
Right. No one's immune.
So I think after those few stories we've shared, we have everyone's attention. So Kim, can you give some tips or a few things on how people can protect themselves?
Well, first I want to say you can't live in fear. Identity theft is part of our reality, and we do have to live our lives. It's not going anywhere, but there are 3 things that you need to have in place to combat it and have a chance to minimize your risk. The first is access to counsel, to a professional that you can ask questions and find out what your options are, what you can and can't do, especially since it may or may not happen in the state that you live in. Daily monitoring is the next thing. Always be looking at your accounts. Always open your mail. These days, our mail doesn't always represent what it looks like from the envelope, so It's important to open it, and that's part of your daily monitoring of your accounts. Is making sure that you know that someone has transacted, even if it's you. And then the third thing is professional restoration services. I mean, once you have a breach, we chuckle about it a little bit, but if you have a really serious breach, how many of us would really even know what to do, let alone have the ability to travel to multiple places to address it? You want someone that can do that for you.
Right, for sure. And I think, thinking about what we do here at McGohan Brabender and working with employers and their employees and making sure that they have what they need from a benefit perspective and an overall well-being perspective, I think, while we focus in the employee benefit space, we think this is a benefit at work that people can gain access to, which is, having this type of service available to them. I mean, we offer things like EAP that sometimes contains things for legal. We offer things like financial wellness along with all of the other standard benefits that you're used to. And so employers are looking for ways to help their employees. And I think this is part of our conversation and part of the reason we wanted to talk to you today about this. So, what are some of the benefits of an employer-sponsored plan like LegalShield? I mean, I think we've all been exposed to it, like you said, if you've shopped at Target or Home Depot or DSW or any of the big boxes, you've gotten a letter that said, hey, your ID is compromised and your credit card got canceled and they sent you a new one, which I usually find out when I'm trying to get gas. But, walk us through the process of how LegalShield helps an employee and how an employer might make this available for their employees, and why. Why would they even want to?
Well, the nice thing is with an employer-sponsored plan, your employee benefit management team has already kind of taken some of the evaluation out of the picture for you. There's so many options out there, so you know that this is a quality coverage because they've already looked into that for you, or they wouldn't be offering it, and it's comprehensive. You are also going to enjoy a reduced group rate, so you're paying for it differently than you would if you were an individual getting that same coverage. You have the opportunity for payroll deduction, and then it's typically portable as well. So whatever it is you sign up for, you can keep as long as you choose to keep the membership. I say, we're not here, again, to say that no one will ever be a victim. Chances are they will be. But what a service like this does is offer you professional advice from experts without worrying about their typical hourly rate. It helps you mitigate damages, minimize the vulnerability and loss, and really just provide peace of mind that you've got professionals that can take care of it, not only for that employee, but also for the employer.
It makes sense. I mean, we insure our cars, we insure our houses, we insure our health, we insure our life. This is just one of those things because it's a risk. And we're all at risk for it, like you said, unless we're off the grid. And I don't know those people because they're off the grid. So
right, exactly. So can you kind of break down a few of the different types of coverages that maybe like LegalShield offers and what's available that employees could choose from?
Okay, there's actually two services that LegalShield offers. From an identity theft standpoint, we have a single bureau through TransUnion and a triple bureau through all three credit bureaus, which basically means that your identity is being monitored on a daily basis by either one bureau or all three. And then we have an individual and an individual plus family option as well. And what that service is doing is basically looking at your high-risk applications and transactions, your social media, looking at credit inquiries. We talked about that PII in case somebody's trying to apply for loans in your name. We also have a reimbursement policy of up to $1 million. Now, that single bureau is $25,000. The triple bureau is $1 million. And what that does, we found out in about 2018 that much more of the costs, there were a lot more costs to the consumer that weren't somehow reimbursed by the agency, maybe that refunded their loss. So we have added that. And that's for predictable things like lost wages, lost funds, those kinds of things. You want to make sure a coverage covers those because a lot of times your reimbursement policies are designed in the fine print not to cover those. And then we have licensed private investigators that actually restore your name back to where it was prior to the breach. So it's not just a call center. It's not you going out restoring it yourself. It's professionals that are doing it on your behalf, and they do whatever is required. Now, 70% of identity theft situations actually result in the need to contact an attorney. We have a legal plan. That's our second area of our coverage, and that is access to 6,700 law firms across the country in every area of law to provide personal advice. You can get questions answered. You're eligible for phone calls and letters on your behalf. They'll look at contracts and documents to make sure that they're okay. Now, in an identity theft situation, somebody might have signed a contract for you, and you want to know what it says.
Right.
They can tell you that. IRS audit assistance is also included in there. That's huge. Those folks are more like $400 to $600 an hour, and you have 50 hours of their time covered in your plan, as well as we have will preparation. So the legal plan is one that you can use every day. The identity theft coverage, we would use that. You could use it for consultation every day if you wanted to, because it does have unlimited consultation, but you're only going to really use it when you have a situation, but you want to have it in place so it isn't pre-existing.
So what they need, what our listeners need to know, Kim, is you guys do it all, right? Basically, if I've been compromised and I've got a program like yours, you've got my back and I can take a breath and I don't have to worry that this isn't going to be okay. And I think that's what most people want to know is just how do I fix this? And if you've ever even lost your credit card or your driver's license, it's like your life has come to a screeching halt. And that's just you misplacing it. So I can't even imagine if suddenly someone has hijacked your identity and they're out there pretending like they're you. And it really messes up everything about, daily life today. So talk to me for a minute about, how long does the process normally take? And I know that's probably a loaded question, but from start to finish, but we'll say the average run-of-the-mill identity theft, not something too complicated. What could someone expect in terms of start and end for this frantic part of their life?
I wish I could put that in a bow for you. I'd probably be rich, but it depends on the person's situation. The thing that you always want to do is contact your attorney first. You want to contact the police, depending on your situation. And then you always want to contact the counsel on the ID Shield so that you can get the expert advice based on whatever your situation is. And let me use an example. We were talking earlier about unemployment fraud. Well, unemployment claims fraudulent ones are not all equal. I have spoken with people who they got a notice from Job and Family Services that someone applied for employment. Somebody got a notice from the IRS that they paid unemployment, and now that person is responsible for the taxes. Right. Someone else got a notice that they were the employer and they don't have any employees. So everybody's situation is not the same, and so that's why you want to contact the experts to find out what you can do in your situation.
Yeah. I think the summary on that is don't expect it to be taken care of with,
an hour
in a week or a month, and just let the experts do their thing and, do what you need to do. That's
absolutely.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
A serious situation can take up to 600 hours or roughly 15 weeks because the people that you're communicating with are at work the same time you are, and you're trying to send them faxes and verify information and do all these things. And from an employer standpoint, your employee is worried, they're anxious, they're feeling violated, and they're not focused on the job. And so that's a big deal for the reason that a lot of employers choose to make this available.
So that kind of leads me into my next question I was going to ask you. At a global perspective, so these HR problems that are being solved from this benefit, you're saying are, people can be more focused at work. They're not on the phone freaking out, calling people. Is that the major benefit to HR teams?
There's actually two. That's one of them. The employee being present, being focused on their job. You don't want to run into operator issues or anything like that, especially if they're working with any kind of equipment. But there's absenteeism. The fact is, a lot of times when people are trying to handle this themselves, they're not at work physically. They're in court. They're traveling. They're, trying to deal with traffic tickets and so forth. The reality of identity theft is we're here in Ohio. So say, for example, your information is used this morning in California, Texas, Kansas, Florida, and maybe New York. How are you going to get to all those places to prove it wasn't you?
Right.
So if you have expert assistants, they can do all of that legwork for you, and that employee can stay at home or at work and stay focused on their life.
That's the point.
Right.
That's what we want them to do. So when I think about trying to avoid this from happening, I think about being the social media coordinator here at work, deleting things off social media, maybe not auto-saving your password on your computer. Are there any small steps that people could try to avoid doing so they don't get their identity stolen?
Well, and as a social media person, it's never really gone.
Nope, it's not.
So, criminals, unfortunately, are at work the same time we are, inventing new ways to make problems for us. And so regular monitoring of accounts is key so that if something happened, even if it's you, I'm sure we'd all rather lose $10 versus $10,000, and that has to do with catching it early.
Right.
And then don't share that PII, that personally identifiable information, unnecessarily or carelessly. I think those are the two big ones.
I actually had a quick sidebar story. Nowadays on Instagram, so many people are blogging and working through their social media. And I had a friend from college just recently post that someone had been emailing with her about like a brand deal that she was working on. And it ended up being, it was like a hacker
Oh my
from
gosh.
Russia. And they took control of her account, her Instagram account. And then they were able to take control of all of her other banking, financial, credit card, every piece of information she had online, they had a hold of. And she ended up having to like fight with Bitcoin and try to get her account back, which she did. But if she would have had a benefit like LegalShield, it probably would have been a little easier for her.
Wow.
Right.
That
It
is-
had done a lot of work for her.
It's so
It was terrifying. Yeah.
Oh, same word.
Mhm,
Yeah, that
terrifying.
is terrifying. It gave me goosebumps. So, thinking about this, aside from LegalShield, you're a certified risk expert. That's very cool. I want that title. I don't know how you get that, but it sounds awesome. What Kenzie asked, but what should people be doing with their data? I mean, advice for the general public. What should send up red flags? I mean, you mentioned things like, hey, daily checking, look at your statements. What other things can you think of that we should be considering?
Well, one thing, and you guys mentioned it earlier, do not open emails or respond to requests for information from unknown sources. That is a huge way of being compromised, and legitimate business inquiries do not work that way. They already have your information, and they're typically going to communicate with you in the mail. The second thing is to monitor those accounts daily. Got to keep your eye on the prize, and the prize is you. So it's important to understand what kind of dynamics are going on in your own business affairs so that you can respond quickly. And then the third thing I would say is changing passwords regularly. I know a lot of us not only don't do that, but we will use common passwords like a pet's name or something for everything.
Right.
And we don't change it ever. Another thing to do is using pass phrases, if you've ever heard of that, where it could be just some kind of a phrase that's unique to you. Only you know really what it means, but it's several words as opposed to one.
Yeah.
And then integrating symbols or numbers for the letters, so it makes it a lot harder to guess.
So I'm gonna show my age here. I like things I can remember because I'm getting older and I have more data in my mind. And so I'm guilty of that. And I actually, the longer we talk, the more things I think of that were ID
Ditto.
theft. So I had an email that came to me 2 years ago from the Russians, and they said, hey, we have your passwords. And here they are, and they listed them, and they were correct. And we're going to mess with all your stuff if you don't send us some money. So I went to see our IT folks here at McGohan Brabender, and I said, hey, is this like legit? And he was like, yeah, you need to change all your passwords. So I had 78 passwords saved in my phone. 38 of them were the same. And I had it randomly generate new passwords for me, and I don't know what any of them are. My children immediately freaked out because they could not order anything on Netflix, movie-wise, and they couldn't order anything on Amazon. I have teenagers, and they were like, Mom. And, of course, I couldn't tell them the passwords either because I didn't know them. So I didn't like that at all, either side of it. But I think, choosing what you just said, which is to change your passwords and to do that regularly. And my phone prompts me like, hey, your password's stale, and it wants me to change it. I have them all, saved in there. I probably shouldn't be telling anyone this, but the other thing too to think about is we all love social media, Kenzie. Thank you very much. But people are always posting things out there like, hey, what's your first pet's name, or where'd you grow up, or answer these 5 questions, or I bet you can't answer these questions about me, and which are
fun to read.
Oh my gosh, I know, right? But it's out there, right? And so, maybe not participating in some of those things where you're giving away your personal information like you're talking about, Kim.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you were a victim of ransomware, where they ask you for money back or they kind of threaten you like that. Yeah, it really is, and you can also use a password manager. I know there are software programs out there that will help keep track of that as well, because we do. We have a lot of passwords. We have a lot of things, and not everything is something that we access all the time, which is part of the reason why people tend to use the same one over and over again, so they won't forget how to get into their own systems.
So one kind of question to tie a bow on that whole what people are doing that they shouldn't be doing, is there anything else that you know of besides seemingly harmless? You're harmlessly answering these questions and then you're posting them on Facebook, but what else might people be doing that they don't know is affecting them or could putting them in danger?
Well, as using those predictable and repetitive passwords, that's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Disposing of documents in their original form is one that I'm finding that is on the increase, where people just think it's junk mail and don't bother to shred it or look at it at all, and it goes right into the dumpster. So a dumpster diver is what they're called. Go in there and just pull it out and act on that credit card offer or whatever it is. You don't want to just get rid of it. You want to actually use a cross-cut shredder for sensitive documents. It can't be put back together.
I didn't know dumpster divers were still a real thing. That feels like a lot of effort.
Right. It seems so last decade.
Yeah, they didn't know their job was over, so no, they're still out there.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Well, we're talking about something very low tech, but if you think about the digital age and where we are, any final thoughts about the future of technology and ID theft? Anything you can leave us with?
I would sure say people should not live in fear. We cannot ignore this. It's not going away, but we do need to be armed with the right defenses to protect yourself, and that's your good name. Your most important asset is your good name.
Mm-hmm.
That was wonderful. Kim, thank you so much. You are truly the expert for identity theft and how to protect yourself. So,
well, thanks for having me today. It's been great talking with you.
yes, we appreciate you so much. And if our listeners wanted to get a hold of you or contact you or LegalShield, how would they do that?
The best way to reach me is through your McGohan Brabender account rep. They can certainly get a hold of me, and that way if there's any account specifics that we need to know about, that employer is not reinventing the wheel, will already be ready to talk.
Wonderful. So thank you, Kim, so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. You have a wonderful
Kim.
day.
And if you have any questions or comments, or you want to reach us about side effects, you can email me at kenzie@healthierbirthdays.com.
Or you can email me at ann@healthierbirthdays.com.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Side Effects.